Real esoteric spirituality without all of the fluff, without all of the nonsense. This is the thunderwizard.com YouTube channel. Click subscribe and then hit the little bell button so that you can be notified whenever I've uploaded a video or when I'm doing the live Q&A videos. Good evening, Thunder Wizards. So, tonight I want to talk to you about more about elves and dwarves in Norse mythology. Specifically, I want to ask you, why are dwarves called dark elves or black elves in Norse mythology? It's the only place that you hear them, at least from what I've looked at. It's the only place you hear them called that. Everywhere else, they're called dwarves, in whatever language we're talking about. Dwerg. Dwerg is the root word. English, it's dwarf because the F sound is a change from the GH sound, the sound. Used to be dwerg. But just like the word laugh, L-A-U-G-H, lauch, and cough, C-O-U-G-H, kauch, and rough, R-O-U-G-H, rauch, those all became Fs. Rough, cough, laugh, dwarf. But you only see them called dark elves or black elves in Norse mythology. So I want to ask you, why do you think that is? As you know, I have made a connection between dwarves, men, and elves. And I have made the case that elves are in fact the highest evolution of the dwarf energy, and that humans are in fact a transitional phase between dwarf and elf. I've also made the case that I believe that Odin was a dwarf originally, and that he bypassed the human and went straight past the elf into godhood. And that's what makes him the most revered being in the cosmos, that even the gods themselves look up to him and put him on the throne and call him the Allfather. Because it is my belief that Odin started as a dwarf, meaning the dwarf energy, which is the base of human personality, and through continuous self-awareness and continuing to sacrifice his energy towards self-awareness, he achieved godhood. And that's why he is who he is, why he's so fierce. His fierceness isn't from a violent standpoint, it's just a purity of self-awareness that appears to us as being fierce. But we experience everything that's 100% pure as being, very intense. This is one of the, as we've talked about this is one of the ways that the gods are perceived. So getting back to the title, dwarves are called dark elves in Norse mythology. And they're also called black elves. So Svartalf, Svartalfheim is said to be the dwarf home, and a Svartalf, a black elf, is a dwarf. So why is that? We have light elves, and we have dark elves and black elves. So if we just look at the word itself, a light elf and a dark elf, what is missing is light. If you take light away from a light elf, it becomes a dark elf. And so we have already determined that the dwarves live in darkness, because their home is in caves under the earth. That's where they're said to live. That's where they do all their mining and they do all their smelting. They live under the earth. Whenever they are put into sunlight, they turn to stone. So they avoid sunlight. Sunlight is conscious awareness. So they live just beneath conscious awareness in what I term the subconscious. Remember, there's the conscious, the subconscious, and the unconscious. Somebody could even go so far as to say that the difference between a dark elf and a black elf could be where one dwells in the subconscious and one dwells in the unconscious. A black elf would be in the unconscious, and a dark elf would be in the subconscious. And of course, a light elf would be a being that lives in what we term as higher awareness. So in the heavenly realms, in the highest awareness, where things are the most light, where the vibration is the most intense and fast, you have a lot of light. That's where the light elves live. We know that the word elf can generally mean spirit, earth spirit of any kind. So, and we have to separate between mythological lore and folklore. Folklore is, what the old women sit around and talk about, right? And so the dwarves that we see in, like, Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, we're talking now about folklore. The dwarves that we see in the ancient magical spell called Against a Dwarf, this is folklore. When you hear people, that the average person would walk around and talk about a dwarf this and an elf attacked me last night, we're talking about folklore. So there's a difference between folklore and mythological lore. Mythological lore doesn't, to my knowledge, talk about dwarves or elves attacking humans in their sleep. Folklore talks about elves and dwarves attacking humans in their sleep, causing humans insanity or illness. And in fact, elf is often transposed in folklore as, we would call evil spirit or mischievous spirit or an earth spirit or a goblin or these kinds of things. And that's why we have, to this day, we have those barn stars, those 5-pointed stars on people's barns. That goes all the way back to ancient times when people would put 5-pointed stars on their barns because it kept the elves away and protected the animals from elf shot. So elf shot is something that people had to look out for. So this is folklore versus mythological lore. So the dwarves live in dreams. This is where dwarves are the most powerful. And we know this because there is some evidence that the word dwarf itself may refer to dream. It may even mean dream. Dream and dwarf may have been the same word. Dwerg may have been the same word at some point. There's some controversy about that. We know that from the folklore in the healing spell Against a Dwarf, where a dwarf is attacking somebody in their sleep and either making them sick or making them insane. And so they have this spell that they use against a dwarf to protect somebody. Now, what's interesting about that in Against a Dwarf is that this was a magical healing spell that was used during the time when Christianity was making its conquest over the indigenous people's spirituality. So people, even though they were Christians, they still believed in dwarves and elves. They hadn't gotten rid of that. So, and in the folklore, elves and dwarves could either be, these beings of great power that have reverence, or they can be mischievous or injurious spirits that can cause you harm. But even in the folklore, the dwarves are known to exist in dreams, so much so that they have to do these kinds of healing spells. And what's interesting is that, looking at it now, what they do is they take the names of some saints that are called the sleeping saints. And there's this Christian myth that during the time of the Roman persecution of the Christians, there were 7 Christian saints who holed themselves up into a cave in order to avoid persecution. And the Christians walled them up in the cave. So they went into this cave and fell asleep, and the Romans saw them, and persecuting the Christians, they walled them up. And then centuries later, somebody opened up the cave and found them still there, asleep, alive. And they woke up out of their sleep, and they went down out of the cave into the local population and, bought stuff with ancient coins and talked to people and what year is it and that sort of thing, and found out that they had been asleep for hundreds of years. And then they died right after that. And so the Christian mythology is that, God, Jehovah, saved them from persecution and blah, 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 blah. So these 7 sleeping saints, you find them even in Islamic folklore. You find them talked about there. So these 7 saints, their names are used in this spell against a dwarf. And they're used to heal the person from being attacked by this dwarf that's attacking. So in order to understand why that is, I think, modern times people don't understand, and they just take it as, they're using an indigenous healing practice, and they're just sort of pasting these Christian saints' names onto it. And I'm saying that that's not the case at all. That in fact, that spell against a dwarf is not at all connected to pre-Christian healing pagan practices. And we know that because the folklore about dwarves is that they hate Christianity. And so it's well known in folklore later on that dwarves hate churches, they hate Christianity, they stay away from churches, they hide themselves from religious people, and this obviously is because they feel persecuted. But we can take it a step further. If we really start to analyze what dwarves are and what their function is, and why is it that we find later on that dwarves are causing illness? You don't see that in the ancient mythological lore. You don't see them causing illness. They can be mischievous, they can be dangerous, but they're seen as powerful. They're oftentimes, you can't tell the difference between a dwarf and a human. Dwarves turn into very powerful magical dragons. So they're not these tiny people. They're not these little people running around. And later on in medieval folklore, there are these small people that are, about up to your knee or up to your waist, and they're very powerful and very brave and very fierce, but they also hate Christianity, and they are seen as causing illness and insanity to people. And so I think that this against a dwarf healing spell is not at all coming from paganism, it's coming from Christianity, because they use the 7 names of the sleeping Christian saints to battle against dwarves, which live in dreams. This is the dream state. This is where dwarves are most powerful. And so we see this connection with sleep again. So what do they use? They don't use like the name of Michael the Archangel. They use the name of the sleeping saints. So it means that this the dwarf that's causing whoever, the person who's being attacked, it's happening in their dream state. In their dreams is when they're being attacked. Now, if we take it also to mean perhaps physical illness, like the word elf shot. Elf shot means you have to be careful of elves. So what's interesting is that you have this shift from mythological understanding of elves and dwarves, and elves are seen as these very high level, very righteous, almost deities. And they're called light elves, and they're to be revered and respected, and they have a strong association with the ancestors. In fact, they're so revered that during in Scandinavia, when Scandinavia was going through the Christian, which was later, when they were going through Christian persecution later on, and transferring over from paganism to Christianity later on, you see that in the countries that still followed the old ways, when Christians were traveling through those areas on the night of the Elfablot, the elf ritual, which happened every year, whenever that night was, Christians were not allowed on your property. Any other time, if a Christian comes by and knocks on your door, you are expected to let them in and to feed them and to, give them a place to sleep and all that. But during the time of the elf ritual, they chased you off if you were a Christian. They chased you off with pitchforks. And your life was in danger if you tried to go onto a pagan's property during the elf ritual. So this is how much reverence they had for the elves. But then later on, in different parts, you start hearing about elf shot and having to protect yourself from the elves. And then you have to protect yourself from the dwarves. And so this is because of something that I think is really profound, which I'm going to elucidate for you. I was thinking about this past week. So, as you know, one of the things that I teach the most is that in order for us to be completely happy and connected to our infinite divine energy, which will give us power, youth, prosperity, happiness, all that good stuff. As you know, I say we have to follow our soul desire. Our desire that we have incarnated in this body with to experience in this life. And that this is the highest form of self-awareness, is to be aware of what gives me the greatest joy. And as you know, this is the biggest stumbling block when it comes to being wealthy and happy, prosperous, and healthy, is that people have conflict within themselves. And the conflict will always center around, should I go do what makes me happy? I want to be a ballerina. Or should I go and be a pharmacist? Because that's what my dad wants me to be, and there's where the money is, and to be a good person, you have to make money. And so you have this fight within yourself. Your soul wants to go off and become a ballerina, but you want to be accepted in society, and you want your parents to love you, so you become a pharmacist instead. And then people create this rage within themselves that then creates all kinds of physical problems and illness. It creates poverty, depression, alcoholism, drug addiction. These are all coming out of conflicts that are happening inside the person because they're fighting with themselves about either doing what they want or wanting to be accepted by society. And it creates rage. And the rage is on an unconscious level. You're not aware of it. You're going through life thinking everything's fine, but, oh, I have these back problems, and, oh, I have this condition, and. But what's happening is that on an unconscious level, you are rageful at yourself and at the people who you are trying to please, because they are keeping you from what it is you truly want on an unconscious level. Now, what does that have to do with elves and dwarves and Christianity? So, as you know, the ancient understanding of how to live life was to be brave. You lived the life of the warrior, the life of the hero. And what does the hero do? The hero goes out and conquers and fights for himself, fights for his own glory. Christianity comes in and says, no, fighting for your own glory is vain and it is a sin against God. You are only allowed to do whatever it is that pleases God or gives God glory. You cannot bring glory to yourself. So much so that, who are those guys? The Amish. They won't even put buttons on their shirts because you're bringing too much attention to yourself. And to do anything that brings pride is evil and sinful, and God will strike you down for that. God will throw you in hell for being proud of yourself. Right? So you have this clash of cultures coming together, where on the one hand you've got the pre-Christian pagan understanding of my job is to go out and gain glory for myself, and I glorify my people and my clan and my family when I go and succeed and become the hero. And then you have Christianity comes along and says, no, Jesus is the only king. You must bow down to him, carry your cross, be sick and miserable. This life is just toil while you wait for, to receive glory after you die. And the more that you humiliate yourself and drag yourself through the mud. I mean, even to this day, in Mexico, people will, cut up their knees as they crawl along in the dust on the way to go worship some saint somewhere. So you have these two clashes there. So what's going to happen in this interim period where you have these pagans and heathens who are converting to Christianity? They don't go one day from believing in the gods and the dwarves and the elves and the Vanir. They don't go from that one day to believing in nothing but the one true God. That doesn't happen overnight. There's this period of transition where they still believe in all of these folk, now they're folk tales. They still believe in all of these folk superstitions, but at the same time, Christianity is coming in and morphing itself on top of it. So now elves, instead of being these extremely powerful beings of light, are now these things you have to be careful of. And the dwarves are beings that live in the realm of dreams who can make you insane and make you sick. They hate Christianity. Dwarves especially, we find out, hate Christianity. And I think the elves were probably turned into guardian angels, and so that didn't, but dwarves are seen more as earth spirits. They're under the earth. And so the things that had to do with the earth were especially targeted by Christians as being evil. And that any spirit that had an association with the earth was seen as being a demon. So the dwarves turned into these powerful creatures that could be mistaken for humans, who could turn into dragons, now become these subhuman, little creatures that are as high as your knee, who hate religion and can cause you to become sick. Now, I am going to say that they were right, that dwarves actually created illness and insanity, and not for the reasons that you may think on the surface. Not because they're trying to get revenge, or because they're rebelling, or because they're evil spirits, but because they simply are exhibiting what happens inside the individual on a subconscious level, on an unconscious level, when they are in conflict with their own soul desire. Here you have a people who have been taught for thousands of years to be brave, to be willing to die in battle to achieve their desires, who are said to gain glory by achieving what they want for themselves, and living in what we would call a democracy, where the whole tribe gets together and the chiefs are not dictators. They mediate between the whole tribe, and everybody votes and everybody has an equal say, and the chief listens to everybody and says, based on what I've heard, I think what we all want to do is this. We go from that to having some king lording it over you and shaking his finger and telling you what to do and what not to do. And we have a God that's standing up and pointing his finger at you and telling you what to do and what not to do. There's no personal glory here. So people's soul desire ends up this is where you start to have conflict. And then this conflict is now raging on the subconscious and the unconscious levels. And so people are going insane, and they're making themselves sick. Because in my experience, especially physical illnesses, in fact, I just got off the phone with somebody today, and we were talking about that. And, I certainly have experienced it, but, I'm here to tell you that the majority of your physical ailments, pains, oh, I've got this pain here, or I've got a bad neck or a bad back, or I've got tendonitis, even things up to cancer, I've got COPD, I've got this cough that won't go away. These are all signs that you are in unconscious internal conflict with yourself. And depending on where it is in the body, will tell you what the conflict is about. Somebody with COPD, right? They just can't get rid of a cough. This is unresolved sadness. This is sadness on a deep level that is on the unconscious level. Somebody has not worked through all their sadness. I know, because this started to happen with me when my partner passed. I saw that almost immediately I started having this, it wasn't quite a cough yet, but I had this congestion in my lungs that just kind of wouldn't completely go away. And so I knew what it was. So I, brought up all of my sadness, and I bawled my eyes out, and I cried, and I yelled and screamed at the universe for weeks and weeks on end. And that relieved it. And if you've got, lower back pain, it's because you are in conflict with yourself. You feel unsupported by the universe. There's something you want to do in terms of your life and your career that you're not doing, because either you want to make money or be successful. You end up in this state of never having enough money, and nothing ever works out for you, and you're poor. It's because you're fighting with yourself, and you're feeling unloved and unsupported by the universe, and it lodges in the back. Same thing with tendonitis. I mean, I could just go all up and down the list of all different kinds of things. So in medieval times, what would be happening is you have these people, even generations later, because this stuff doesn't go away immediately. It takes generations, hundreds of years of being indoctrinated into a belief system. You have people who are still intuitively, they want to go live for themselves. They want to do the things that make them happy. They want to bring themselves glory. They want to live in communion with nature. They probably want to worship nature and worship the gods. They want to worship their ancestors. And they are being told not to do that, that's evil and that's wrong. And they want to be accepted and loved by their current church and society. And so what ends up happening is you have this brewing self-hatred that is just simmering under the surface. And so when people fall asleep and they start to go to sleep, they start to experience all of this rage, and it feels to them like they're going insane. And so what do these guys do? They come with this Christian healing chant, which is against a dwarf, which is calling on the saints who sleep, the Christian sleeping saints, to go into their dreams and to give them God's healing and God's grace and Jesus this and Jesus that. And so I find it interesting that we have this understanding about dwarves and the subconscious mind and what the dwarves really are. So those are some of my thoughts, and I'm thinking a lot about manifestation and where dwarves fit into that. And as you know, if you watch the big 20-minute manifestation video that I did, where I go into detail about how the law of attraction is missing the point, thinking that there's only the conscious and the subconscious mind, that you've got this unconscious mind in there as well. I'm now really starting to think about what the subconscious mind really is. And so when somebody has a block in terms of their ability to intend their reality, which is the subconscious mind, this is where you're going to have problems with the dwarves. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all. Think about it again. Dwarves in mythological folklore are not seen as little people. They're seen as very powerful beings. In fact, they're so powerful that 4 of them are the 4 directions. North, south, east, and west are dwarves. That is not some tiny little creature that's the size of your knee. And so when people, if they're having visions and they see a dwarf running around, guess what? The dwarves are being pushed down. Their emotional reality is being pushed down under the ground. And so, yeah, they're these little squished, fat, angry people who are rebelling against the church. So none of this happens for no reason. There's always an explanation and a reason for all of this. And then let's talk a little bit more about dark elves. So I was working with an apprentice a couple years back. And working with him and talking with him, I came to understand why the dwarves are called dark elves. And that's because he had a strong connection with that. Now, if you're familiar, it's hard on this because I'm not on my, my normal live YouTube Q&A, so I don't have all the pictures that I can put up. I don't have all that stuff available to me right now. But I will come the end of this month. Now that we're in March, I think by the 28th or the 29th, I'll be able to go live on YouTube again. Anyway, we were talking about the placement of the dark elves. Now, I had avoided that because I honestly didn't know what to do with it. The light elves is very clear. The light elves, to me, are the ancestors of the human beings that have achieved enlightenment, bodhisattvas, and they live in Elf home, which is in the northwest. And the dwarves live in, or literally the dark elves, the black elves, live in the southwest. And the southwest is the realm of the subconscious mind, the realm of human beings and of magic and all of that. So why would you have light elves living in the northwest, which is higher awareness, and dark elves living in the southwest, which is the subconscious mind, the realm of magic? We know that dwarves are magical beings. We know that they are very powerful magicians. In fact, they create many of the sacred magical tools of the gods. And when you want a magical tool, you go to the dwarves. The gods go to the dwarves and have the dwarves make them all kinds of things. Thor's hammer, everything. This comes from the dwarves. This is how powerful they are. And I believe that the Tolkien understanding of elves and dwarves is absolutely correct. That when your subconscious emotional reality is in alignment with the elves, which is your higher awareness, when your higher awareness and your lower self are in alignment, you have the power to create magic. I firmly believe that. And that the dwarf nature wants to worship the elf nature. And when we are out of alignment, then the dwarf nature starts to fight against higher awareness. And that's when you have all kinds of conflict. And I talked about it yesterday. The reason why in The Hobbit, the elves and the dwarves are about to go to war. The armies are facing off, but they never go to blows. You never see them go to blows. You hear them talk about it all the time, but they never actually go to war with each other. And the reason for that is because it's not possible. What's happening is that you're disconnected from your higher self, and your higher self is saying, hey, hang on. You are out of alignment with yourself. The lower self feels attacked. Don't tell me what to do. How dare you destroy my whatever it is? And they're fighting with your higher self. When that schism gets to a point where the human being starts to really become disconnected with their soul desire, then comes the army of the orcs, which some people according to that are elves that were taken hostage and destroyed, and we could call them the black elves. And so what is that? It's your unconscious unresolved issues coming up and creating major disease, chaos. And that's why the dwarves and the light elves never fight. But when all of the dark elves and the orcs and the goblins and the trolls and the evil sorcerers, they come up out of the ground and they create a huge world war, then the dwarves, the elves, and the men all come together and fight that. And this represents in the human being when our subconscious mind becomes so disconnected from our higher self that the unconscious starts streaming out into our life, and we have chaos and poverty and illness and violence and disease. It's because our unconscious issues are now have free reign to destroy our lives. The conflict that's happening on the unconscious level is now bled out into our conscious awareness. So I told you about the guy that I was working with, and he had this intuition. He said, I think that dark elves are in the southwest with the dwarves. That they're not dwarves, they're actually something else. That you have elves, you have dark elves, and then you have dwarves. And he was saying that the dark elves, he felt, were beings that had that were concerned with working directly with the dwarf nature and the subconscious mind to align them to higher awareness. That the light elves were so far beyond human understanding that they were just about, into infinity. And so they stood back and they only brought us, altruism. So when you work directly with the light elves, like if you want to try it out, go face the northwest and just ask, what should I do? Just meditate on, tell me what I should do. You're going to start getting these intuitions about how to not only make your life better, but how it's going to help all consciousness. You're going to become aware of the ripple effect of how your actions create a ripple effect in all beings. You'll start to become aware that when you act a certain way, not only is it harmful for you, but it causes harm to other people. For example, like whenever people do an intervention on an alcoholic, the alcoholic always says the same thing. Hey, I'm just doing this. I'm not hurting anybody. And then you hear from the family members, well, yes, actually you are. You're hurting me. It hurts me every time you do that. When you do that, you start acting in this way. And, then you find out that you can't use the excuse that I'm not hurting anybody. This is just my thing. This is my business. Leave me alone. That's the light elves. The light elves will come and give you that very altruistic understanding. And he was saying that he thought that the dark elves were elves, but they were more concerned with personal satisfaction. And so then they'd be more closely connected to what we would call magic, altering reality to fit our desires. And so they were quite light elves. They were definitely more powerful than the dwarves, and the dwarves looked to them for guidance. It's almost like if you have the CEO sits up at the top of the building, and he's just sitting there, and he has the view of the city, and he's sitting behind his computer or whatever, and he's doing all the thinking. That's the light elf. And then you have the executive who reports back and goes down underneath the first floor into the factory, where he walks around the factory workers and tells them, okay, here's what the executives, here's what the CEO says you got to do, and here are the new understanding, and here are the rules. And he goes back and forth between light elves and the dwarves. So we call him a dark elf, because he's still in that part where he wants to be wants to get his hands dirty. And so I'm saying that when we look at the words and what they mean, we're going to find out what the natures of these beings are. So that's all really interesting information. And in reality, all of what I just said means absolutely nothing unless you can apply it in your life. This is why I tear people apart who come onto the channel and leave these really super intellectualized things about what this means, because I have no respect for people who aren't sitting there thinking to themselves, how can I apply this to make my life better? And this understanding of what the elves and the dwarves are and how they shifted from mythological ancient understandings to folklore, medieval folklore to today, has an absolute bearing on how we live our lives. Bottom line is that if we suppress our personal selfish desire that our soul wants to do, we will create these orcs. We'll create black elves. We'll create these very powerful beings that will bring upon us death, destruction, illness, insanity, poverty, misery. And it all stems from us walking away from our true selves, which is represented in the historical understanding as our ancestors walked away from their indigenous beliefs and adopted this, very life-destructive, very suppressive belief that there's this judgmental God up in heaven pointing his finger at you, hates your guts simply because you're born, and you better not go do what makes you happy, because if you do, then you're bringing glory to yourself and you're sinning against me, the Almighty. And I think that's, if we can understand how to take that out of this folklore and apply it to ourselves, we can live a better life, because that's what it's all about. If I can't live a better life from this understanding, then it means nothing to me. It's useless and I want nothing to do with it. But if I can apply it to my life, then I will. And so, because I found in the ancient beliefs that when you really peel back and look at it, it's telling you how to enjoy your life in mythological, symbolic, spiritual terms. Even though I say symbolic, it doesn't mean they don't exist. It's just another level of understanding. And whether you want to be really practical about it and apply it to your personal life, or whether you want to be lofty about it and let it take you to the heights of intellectual understanding, I don't care, as long as the end result is you can apply it in your life. So, having said that, let's take a look. I don't see any questions here. So normally what I would do at this time is I would take a break and I would play some ads while I wait for a question. So if anybody has a question out there, there's only 6 of you out there. If you're formulating a question, then I will get ready to close this up by saying this. There's a lot of changes that are coming to my channel, which is I'm really starting to focus towards very specific study and goals. So we have on the Patreon channel, when you go on to thunderwizard.com, you will go to Patreon, my Patreon channel, the thunderwizard.com Patreon channel. And there you can subscribe. At the lowest level of subscription, what you're going to get is access to, I don't even know how many hundreds of hours of master shamanism training, where I teach you from the ground up what shamanism is. I teach you about runes, I teach you about energy work, I teach you about the 9 directions, the 9 worlds, how to work with the gods and the ancestors, and how to do all kinds of stuff. That is the first level, and I've done so many of those videos, I've kind of maxed that out because people stopped watching the new ones. So what I did is I added the next level above that. Next level above that is called the Manifestation Mastery Course. And when you subscribe at that level, you get access to all of the shamanism, in-depth shamanism training, which I've talked about. And then we start talking about these higher levels of how to manifest, how to access the subconscious and the unconscious mind, how to use all of that information that I just taught you about in the lower level, about how to use the directions, how to use ritual, what all that stuff means, the runes. We're going to take all that and we're going to start applying it towards real magic, real manifestation. On that level and above, people are going to have access to live Q&As that will only be on the Patreon channel for people who have put the effort and the time in to read the books, to do the exercises. You know, there's a lot of people who just come on my channel and just watch the videos and watch the Q&As, and that's great. But they only have a very superficial understanding of what it is that I'm teaching. If you really want to get the true power out of it, you're going to have to put some time and effort into it. That's what the Patreon channel is about. And so we're going to start bringing that together. So the new landing page that I have for all of that stuff is called neo.thunderwizard.com. It's the 4 tools. So what I'm saying is that there are 4 tools to master all of this. The first one is you have to know what your destination is. Your destination and the map is your soul desire. The second is you have to have a vehicle that will take you to your destination. That is life force energy. The universe is made of life force energy, conscious life force energy. So you can't do magic, you know, bend the fabric of the matrix of the universe without having access to life force energy itself. So that is in the celestial qigong. That's the second tool. The third tool is you have to know the rules of the road. If you know where your destination is and you have a vehicle that'll take you there, you have to know what the rules of the road are. And this is the 5 rules to master the matrix. That one, you don't even have to think about it. If you just follow those rules, the matrix will obey you. You'll be able to get that life force energy, the universe, to obey you. And then the 4th tool is what we're doing now. And the live Q&As and the in-depth mentoring that I'm going to be doing on the Manifestation Mastery Program, that is the 4th tool, because it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to do it. And that's where the rubber meets the road. So there, I've done my commercial for the moment. Let's see if any questions came up. Okay, so Paul, if you have a question, and you don't have to worry about it now because there's nobody else asking questions, but if you write the word question, I know you're asking a question instead of just leaving a comment. You say, how can we defeat evil reptilian people and evil dwarfs? So Paul, did you listen to what I was saying? Did you listen to what I was saying? All of these things are you. There is nothing in this universe that is not you. So, you know, how do you defeat evil reptilians? I've seen a reptilian. I've seen them. So I can tell you that people who say they've seen reptilians, I believe them, most of them, not all of them. Maybe not even most of them. If you see a reptilian, all it means is that you're living in your reptilian brainstem. So you're asking me how to defeat your own reptilian brainstem. Drop all fear-based beliefs. Drop all conspiracy theories. Anything, any belief that puts you in a place where you are afraid that something is going to harm you, you are in your reptilian brainstem. If you're in your reptilian brainstem, then you're going to be vulnerable to the reptilians. The reptilians are you. You at your core are reptilian. The body, what you're looking at here is evolutionary factors that have covered over a spinal column with a reptilian brain on. You are the reptilians. So put some time and effort. Please go onto my channel, thunderwizard.com, on the YouTube channel. Put some time and effort into watching my videos. Learn what I teach. Read my books so that you know what these things are. The evil dwarves, here's the difference between a good dwarf and an evil dwarf. Again, it kind of bothers me because it sounds like you really didn't listen to what I was saying. But the difference between a good dwarf and an evil dwarf is this. A dwarf is nothing more than your own emotional desire. You have an emotional desire. When you suppress that desire out of guilt, that good dwarf gets angry and becomes an evil dwarf. So the orcs that come out of the ground and all those things are your own human desires that left to themselves will bring you happiness and satisfaction. When you suppress them out of fear, or wanting to be accepted or wanting to be loved or out of guilt, you turn those good, happy feelings into angry, evil feelings. And so what you experience as being attacked is your own unconscious mind trying to wake you up to say, stop being out of alignment with yourself. Go do what makes you happy. And it's easy for me to say that, but more than likely, there's probably a lot of spiritual work that has to go on so that you can become conscious of all of that crap you've pushed into your unconscious mind. So, Paul, I highly recommend that you go onto my channel, put some time and effort into watching my videos, read my books, understand what it is that I teach. Okay? Thank you for your question. Ryan Soderlund, question. Is there a lack of content on a mobile platform for Patreon? I subscribed at the low level. Is there a lack of content on a mobile platform? I'm not sure what you're asking me. If you signed in at the bottom level, the $25 level, you have access to, and here's what you got to do. When you sign up, you then, if you go to the bottom, I don't know what a mobile platform is, so I don't know what happens when you look at it on a phone. That's another thing that bugs the crap out of me. Everybody has to do everything on their fucking phone. Sit in front of a computer. To me, it feels like people aren't putting effort into anything. You know, you can look at it on a iPad, on a desktop computer, but it's like one of the things that has to happen. You know, I'm sorry I'm taking this out on you, but it's, you know, I'm an old guy and it pisses me off. One of the things that has to happen if you want to make progress in this path is you are going to have to do some work. You are going to have to go and do things that are inconvenient. You're going to have to put time into reading and researching and practicing. So you're going to have to put hours into practice these things. It's easy to just sit with your phone and watch YouTube. That's the easy part. Putting it into practice is going to take time and it's going to take effort. So when you're on Patreon, even at the $25 level, what happens is that you go to the bottom of the page and it says click more, or more, whatever more. You keep clicking on more until you get all the way to the bottom. It's going to take you a while. When you get to the bottom, it's going to say video number 1, and I'm going to start teaching you from the bottom up how to work through shamanism. So there's a whole library of things, from runes to energy work to magic to shamanism to ritual. You know, there's just no shortage of videos on there. Start from the bottom and work your way up. When you get to the higher level, the $50 and above, then you're going to have access to the Manifestation Mastery course, which is something I've just rolled out. So in fact, I'm going to do it later tonight. I'm putting out new videos every week on that as well. And then, as I said, there's going to be a live Q&A. So again, I'm not sure what your question is. You said I just didn't see a lot on there. Well, I don't know what that means. How could you not see a lot on there? If you click on that, you're going to be on a page that has videos. You have to scroll to the bottom and keep hitting the more until you keep going all the way. There's got to be at least 5 or 6 different pages full of videos on there. It's a lot of them, maybe 10. There's a lot of pages on there. So again, it bugs me. It bugs me because it feels like people just don't put effort into anything. They don't it annoys me on my YouTube channel. There's so many amazing videos on the free YouTube channel that have almost no views because people aren't putting the time and effort to research what's on there. I mean, I can put the videos out, but you have to be the one to go look for them. Put the time and effort into it. That's what I'm trying to say. So I'm sorry I took that out on you, but that's just something that kind of bugged me. All right, so I don't see any more questions here. All right, and I did my little commercial there for everything. So that's it. So that's it for now. We're going to keep talking about dwarves and elves. And remember, coming up, I believe the 29th of March, I finally can get back on YouTube and start doing live Q&As again. So a lot of big changes coming to the channel, and a lot of opportunities for people to make money. I think I'm going to start branching off into other things like affiliates and things like that, where we can be promoting the channel and be making money at the same time. So, all right, that's all that I have today, my friends. I will talk to you later.